Turn to Proverbs 17. Proverbs 17. We're going to look at verse 14 of Proverbs 17. We're going to be talking about conflict resolution. Um, Conflict resolution is a very broad subject. So we've been building it from the origins of conflict, and we did that the first 2 weeks. So on tonight, I kind of yes, if there's a city you want us to come to, let us know for sure. Drop it in the chat, inbox us, all the above. Um, but tonight I want to talk about um causes of conflict. Um, and so let's dive in. I know I'm stumbling and I'm trying to do four things at once. But Proverbs 17 verse 14, and it says Proverbs 17 verse 14. It says, where is it at? The beginning of strife is like releasing water. Therefore, stop contention before a quarrel starts. The beginning of strife is like releasing water. Therefore, stop contention before a quarrel starts. What does that mean? It means you got to learn how to prevent conflict, because preventing conflict allows you not to have to deal with conflict, right? Now, obviously, we know that for most people, they can't prevent conflict. So that's why we're talking about conflict resolution. But think about this. The Bible says starting a quarrel is like opening a floodgate. So stop before a dispute breaks out. Stop before a dispute breaks out. Now I want to read James chapter 4. James chapter 4. We're going to look at verse 1 and 2. All right, verse 1 and 2 of James chapter 4. Let's look at verse 1 and 2. In relationships and marriage, conflict oftentimes is going to take place. Very few people are going to be able to prevent it. Now, the goal is to always prevent conflict. But in the event that you cannot prevent it, we have to learn how to manage it and overcome it and deal with it. But James chapter 4, verse 1, it says, what is causing quarrels and fights among you? Don't they come from the evil desires at war within you? You want what you don't have, so you scheme and kill to get it. You are jealous of what others have, but you can't get it, so you fight and wage war to take it from them, yet you don't have what you want because you don't ask God for it. Now, I'm going to put this verse in the context of our conversation. Where do wars and fights come from among you? That's the question. Where do wars and fights come from among you? Don't they come from evil desires within you? So what does this mean? Marital conflicts are oftentimes less about the other person. They begin within the individual, internal frustration, selfish ambition, unmet needs, unmet desires, unmet cravings, all right? So conflict oftentimes is a byproduct of a person not getting what they want or not getting what they need, which brings me to this point. When we talk about the top 10 conflicts in a marriage, number one would be poor communication, right? Poor communication. But when we talk about the top 5 origins of a conflict in marriage, number one is unmet needs. So I want to talk about poor communication and unmet needs. If you're taking notes, write that down. The number one conflict in the average marriage is poor communication. The number one unmet need, the number one origin of a conflict comes from an unmet need. All right. Now, when it comes to unmet needs, by definition, this simply means a person is in a relationship or marriage where they're not getting their needs met emotionally, physically, or mentally. All right. Or they're, for lack of better words, they're being ignored, they're being denied, misunderstood, all these things create inevitable conflict. All right. Does any of this resonate with any of you all right now? Just give me a yes or no in the chat. All right. Okay. All right. Good, good, good. All right. Now, conflict is a dimensional thing. All right. Number one, you have spiritual conflict. Number two, you have biological conflict. Number three, you have psychological conflict. And then number four, you have sociological conflict. And what this means is, from a spiritual, number one, when you have spiritual conflict, that means you have demonic interference in your marriage. All right. That means you have demonic interference in your marriage. All right. When you have a biological conflict, that means you have an issue that is being created because of the differences between male and female. All right. So that innate gender design, right, creates differences that oftentimes get expressed, right? And if not resolved, it leads to more problems. That's that male and female war dynamic, all right? That conflict dynamic between biological genders, right? Then you have the third, which is the psychological conflict, which is your mental, emotional, which leads into behavioral conflicts. That's where you get to the unmet needs, right? That's where you get to the fear responses, right? That's where you get into the emotional immaturity, the unhealed trauma, the unmanaged triggers, the pride, the fear of vulnerability, all these different types of things. And then you get into the sociological conflict where you have a struggle between cultural divide, meaning society has created some level of gender struggle, culture struggle, family system struggle, right? And so when we talk about these types of factors sociologically, culture plays a major role. Society plays a major role, because whatever the culture and society norms are, they're going to infiltrate the individual mentally and emotionally, which is which still boils into the psychological, and still boils into the biological, and still boils into the spiritual. So let's dive into this a little bit deeper. I was thinking about something before the session, and I realized that one of the struggles in marriage, right, when it comes to conflict resolution, is the victim paradox, I call it, right? The victim paradox. It's where the person who gets hurt, or the person who gets betrayed, or the person who gets done wrong, or the person who gets neglected, etc., etc. It's where when the victim or that person expresses their issue with the person who hurt them, aka their spouse, and yet the spouse somehow flips it and makes it about how the victim is expressing their pain. Does this resonate with anybody? And what I've come to realize is this is a major problem in marriages. And so it's kind of like where the victim, being the victim, doesn't always lead to a resolution. It's where you do me wrong, and yet I have to cater to your feelings. You did me, you betrayed me, and I have to console you. You cheated, but I have to take accountability for, like wait a minute, what? This is a major issue within the dynamics of relationships. Does this make sense to everybody? It's you get mad at me, because I'm mad at you for something you did that hurt me. Some people might call it narcissism. Some people call it gaslighting. There's all types of terms that we put on stuff. But the reality is, it's just plain wrong. Let's just call it what it is, right? So I call it the victim paradox. It's where in many relationship dynamics, the person who was hurt, whether it was through betrayal or lies or emotional neglect, they assumes that their pain, right? It's like the victim automatically assumes that their pain, their problems, their issue with their spouse will naturally lead to the other person being humble and accountable and compassionate and understanding. But yet they are met with something else, the exact opposite. And now it turns into a conflict, or it turns into something bigger than a conflict, because all the person who did the hurt had to do was apologize or accept accountability or listen or hear the person out. This is a real big issue. And unfortunately, being hurt doesn't guarantee understanding from your partner. Expressing the pain caused by your partner doesn't always mean you're going to be understood automatically. And so sometimes in this conflict dynamic, we have to find ways to work through it. Is this making sense to everybody? So as I was thinking about that, I began to think about layers of conflict. And the reason why a lot of people can't handle or solve their conflict within marriage is because the conversation and the emotions take over so much to the point where you don't even really understand the type of conflict you're dealing with. And that's where you start to do what they call is throw the kitchen sink at each other, where what was first about the dishes now becomes about the in-laws, and it becomes about the girls' trip last year, and then it becomes about the man, the boys not out last week, and it becomes about what they did last Christmas, and it becomes about everything else but the actual momentary issue. So what I want you to do is I want you to write this down, because I'm going to say it slow because I want you to get this, right? There's layers to conflict. And if you understand conflict categories, it'll help you learn how to discuss or communicate through the challenge of the conflict, right? Number one, you have communication conflict. Number two, you have emotional conflict. Number three, you have value-based conflict. VALUE, value-based conflict. Number four, you have role-based conflict. Number five, you have behavioral conflict. Number six, you have historical conflict. Number seven, you have circumstantial conflict. Number eight, you have topical conflict, TOPICAL, like topics, topical conflict. Number nine, you have minor/major conflict. Number 10, you have financial conflict. Number 11, you have character conflict. Number 12, you have moral conflict. And then number 13, you have family conflict. All right, so I'm going to read through them very fast. Communication, emotional, value-based, role-based, behavioral, historical, circumstantial, topical, minor/major, financial, character, moral, and family. All right. So notice number 4 is role-based conflict. Role-based conflict. Let me see. I got y'all. Let me see. No problem. No problem. Y'all are good. So the thing is when we're dealing with these categories of conflict, right? And I put them in the I put them in the chat. Don't worry, y'all. Appreciate y'all. So here's what I want to do. I want to go over a couple of things, and then I want to open the floor for these 13 for us to talk about, because I want to touch on the ones that are near and dear to your personal situation in this present day of your marital journey. But here's what I want to dive into before we get there. What causes conflict among us? Well, they come from desires within, right? Some good, some bad. And if we don't know how to prevent or stop a conflict, then guess what? Things are going to elevate or escalate, all right? Now, conflict arises when 2 or more people are trying to meet their own needs and meet their own wants, okay? So look at it this way. If I'm in a marriage, and all of us are, if we're in a marriage, the question becomes, what is your primary responsibility? Well, number 1, it should be to please God. And then number 2, it should be to do your marital duties and responsibilities. Now, as you all know, I'm a stickler for a wife and a husband, or a husband and a wife. Excuse me, I was burping. A husband and a wife should do their job regardless of what the other person is doing. There should be no excuse as to why you are not doing your job in marriage. Yes, there are times where your spouse is not going to be on their A game. And so when a wife is not on her A game, a husband still has to do his job. When a husband is not his A game, a wife still has to do her job. I'm a firm believer that personal accountability in marriage leads to successful marriages, because not everybody's going to be at the top of their game all day, every day. So you cannot be waiting on someone else to do their job just so you can do yours. That is a lack of accountability, and it is immaturity. All right. And it is a blame game. You cannot blame someone for not doing your job as a spouse. All right. So when it comes to conflict, with that being said, I don't want to miss the point. The point is, your job as a spouse is to try to anticipate the needs of your spouse, try to foreshadow the needs and wants of your spouse, and to fulfill the needs and wants of your spouse. That is something that should be a primary responsibility of yours. Even when you're mad, don't be a child. Don't do what you feel like doing based on your emotional state or your attitudinal state. Don't see, children do stuff like that, and you're not a child. So just because you mad at your spouse don't mean you shouldn't cook. Just because you're mad at your spouse don't mean you shouldn't pay a bill. Just because you're mad at your spouse don't mean you shouldn't talk to them. Just because you're mad at your spouse don't mean you should ignore them. That's child behavior. And we have to be honest about this. Too many adults act like babies in marriage. Childish little kids in marriage. We have to get away from that by owning up to the fact that sometimes I act like a child and I don't deal with things like an adult, and I have to learn how to fix that issue quickly, right? And all of us have to do it. And we cannot take 15 years to do it. You should do it in 3 months, 90 days. Now, here's the thing. Matter of fact, let me go a little bit deeper with that. Because if you don't do it in 90 days or less, if you choose to take your time to fix certain things, then you have to be open to making sure that you keep that same energy when it comes to your spouse's flaws. I remember back in the day, I don't do it as much as I used to, but one of the things I used to do, right, when married couples were struggling to be patient and be understanding and things of that nature, right, where a spouse would say things like, well, I'm still working on this. Well, I'm not perfect and things of that nature, right? And so I would say, okay, okay, I understand. Nobody's perfect. You're working on it, and it's not gonna happen overnight. I said, okay, cool. So let me ask you a question: can your spouse cheat on you? And they would say, no, of course not. And I would say, but what if they're working on it? Well, no, no, no. No, you shouldn't be cheating. I said, but what if that's their struggle? What if that's their flaw? Well, why can't they get the patience like you get? What's the difference? You see, y'all see where I'm coming from, right? So my point is, we should not have a mentality to take our time when it comes to fixing our flaws, because we can't pick and choose. So the thing is, with that being said, though, again, just to reiterate, with that being said, you should do everything you can possible to anticipate, foreshadow, and fulfill your spouse's needs. Because when conflict is arising, 9 times out of 10, there's an unmet need and there's poor communication. All right. So unmet needs plus poor communication equals major conflict. Unmet needs plus poor communication equals major conflict. Successful marriages are only successful when you can communicate properly and meet the need of your spouse. When a husband does not have a spiritual father or a shepherd to hold him accountable, Hebrews 13:17 says this: obey them that rule over you, for they watch over your souls, right? The reality is every man needs a leader to lead him. Now, what ends up happening is oftentimes the average man has a pastor. They go to a church and they call that man their pastor, but that pastor is not in their daily life, which means he's not their shepherd, which means he's not really guiding their life. He's not teaching them, coaching them, training them, holding them accountable, sharpening them, developing them, challenging them, testing them. That's just a preacher in the pulpit. That's very different than what the scriptures describe. And any man, any wife who has a husband who doesn't have a leader who's in his life week to week, day to day, that's going to be a struggle and a challenge. Ask my wife, for the last 15 years, every single woman I've counseled who was single, I have one requirement. That man needs to have a source of authority.
Yeah.
Or else do not marry him. Of course, women didn't really listen, and then they suffered the consequences, and then some did. But my point is, when you look at the statistics of my experience, of me telling young ladies this, it's for their benefit. And when they did not listen, they ended up with a man where nobody could check him, control him, hold him accountable. He did what he wanted to do. It was just a turmoil of a relationship. The question, according to the Bible, and we can go over the scriptures if y'all want to. According to the scriptures, there is one way that a person can divorce, and that is infidelity. All right. Now, there is a second one. There is There is a second way a person can divorce biblically, but there's a condition to it. And that condition is you have to be married to an unbeliever. And so Paul says, if you are married to an unbeliever and that spouse who's an unbelieving spouse wants to leave the marriage, then you can leave. God wants you to be and live in peace. So you have infidelity, and then an unbelieving spouse wants to walk away. Nothing else is grounds for divorce according to God. People will make up stuff. People will say stuff based on how they feel, what they think, based on their opinions. That's where you get things like people say you can divorce because of abuse, you can divorce because of all these other things. There is no biblical divorce outside of infidelity and an unbelieving spouse walking away. And we can go over the scriptures if need be.
Yo.
Yes, sir.
All right. So, you kind of spoke on exactly what I was getting at, because I mean I wasn't disagreeing or nothing. Just when I hear stuff, sometimes my mind races. That's why I'm trying to get in the Bible more. Because my wife, she tell me that every day, and I ain't. But I was basically just thinking, and you kind of said it like I said, like if God just say you can only divorce through cheating, but it's like life be life. People go through whatever they go through. So let's say the wife or husband got somebody, their spouse that's maybe doing drugs or beating them down. I think God will give a little grace if you leave. Just my opinion, but I know we gotta follow the Bible, blase. But it's just a thought. I wasn't disagreeing. It's just I just got thoughts.
Yeah, you good. And the thing is, these are real conversations, right? We're very empathetic and sympathetic to people in situations such as domestic violence, addiction, things of that nature. Even whether it's health challenges, all the above, right? The reality is, if we're going to honor God, as difficult as it may be, we just have to honor God based on his word, not our opinions. And that's where sometimes people struggle. They do things, say things, believe things based on their personal opinions and feelings. But it's our job as believers, to the best of our ability, to honor God and his word.
I got you, bro. Appreciate it.
Oh yeah, no problem. So with that, I want to talk about these 13 categories of conflict, right? These 13 categories of conflict. Whoops, let me send it. So I meant to send it to everybody. These 13 areas of conflict, right? And so as we're dealing with these areas, which areas of these did anybody want to dive into?
Well, role-based.
Role-based, all right. So, all right, got you. Role-based conflict. What that is it's when you have marital conflicts based on gender roles, meaning where there is tension over the duties and responsibilities within the marriage, right? Is anybody experiencing that? Or you're having challenges based on the roles? Because role-based conflict is disagreements within gender roles, responsibilities, identity in marriage, things of that nature. And so what that simply, just to give y'all context, is what causes conflict in marriage when it comes to role-based is a wife or a husband may feel like something should be done by the husband or the wife, meaning because you're a husband, you should do this, or because you're a wife, you should do this. And technically, biblically, there is some grounds for a husband to say a wife should be doing this, and there is grounds for a wife to say a husband should be doing this. And so it's important that we understand that, remember, God created male and female specifically for a reason, because there are things men are better at and there's things that women are better at. And within the husband and wife dynamic, those roles help the house function a lot better when the person who's better at it is doing it. Does that make sense, Cortland?
Yeah, you explained that perfectly. Wouldn't role-based and value-based almost be the same, though?
So value-based is a little bit different. So value-based is basically when you have a conflict that is between you and your spouse when it comes to what you believe or your convictions. So a person might say, well, I don't believe drinking is wrong. And then another spouse might be like, no, we shouldn't be drinking in the house with children. So now you have a value-based conflict because you value certain things differently. So you might say you value money a certain way versus your spouse, or you value family a different way than your other spouse, right? You value your mom more than you value something else. So value-based has everything to do with convictions and beliefs and things of that nature. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Just jumping on that part. How can I just say this? How would you overcome it then? If you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, in order to overcome value-based conflict, you're going to have to learn to agree to disagree by respecting someone else's beliefs. And sometimes what that means is you're going to have to just be okay with your spouse doing things you don't like. And then sometimes you're going to have to find some type of common ground, because sometimes you can't just leave it at agreeing to disagree. So for example, let's just say someone is like, secular music, for example, shouldn't be played in our house because of your belief system with God and faith and stuff like that. And let's just say your spouse feels differently about it. Even though they're a believer and all that, they just see it differently. Okay, you're going to have to decide, okay, are we going to not play secular music in the house, or are we going to play secular music in the house, and the person just got to deal with it, right? So in that situation, the goal and the hope is that you come to a common ground to where it's okay, listen, if you're in the house or if the whole family's in the house, I won't play secular music. But if I'm in the house by myself, then I'm going to play secular music. And then y'all could agree on that, kind of like a compromise. Or if it's like drinking or smoking, you might say, hey, listen, I'm going to smoke outside, or I'm going to make sure that I don't smoke in the house, or whatever the case may be. So I'm not going to stop drinking or smoking, but I won't do it around the families, things like that. And that common ground and that compromise is where you have to be willing to give and take. Yeah, that's true. It does get hard at times, but it only gets hard when people don't want to budge on getting their way. See, in marriage, we have to learn to be okay with not getting what we want at times, especially when it's something that isn't life or death. Does that make sense? Perfect. All right, let's get to circumstantial conflict. So with circumstantial conflict, here's the truth, right? Circumstantial conflict is basically when you have circumstances in the marriage or outside of the marriage that's causing pressure or causing stress, or causing issues, right? So for example, it might be like, ever since your parents moved into our house, we've been having problems. That's a circumstance. Or it might be something like, ever since we had children, we've been fighting more. Like, those are circumstantial marital challenges. And so when you have circumstantial challenges, you have to ask yourself, what is it about this that's triggering, whether it's money issues, job loss, health challenges, kids, in-laws, all of those are external things that trigger conflict inside the marriage, which means the communication has to go up a notch in functionality. So you have to be able to sit down and talk about what's making you feel the way you feel and why this outside circumstance or this circumstantial issue is causing conflict within you as an individual. Now, that's the general understanding of it. Jamila, did you want to chime in and ask a more personable question and get some context for your situation, or did you have a question about it? Okay, perfect. All right. You're welcome. You're welcome. All right. Emotional conflict. Ooh, this is one of them ones right here. Emotional conflict is basically when you get your feelings hurt or when your needs are unmet, which leads to hurt feelings, or when you have emotional neglect, which leads to hurt feelings. It's where you don't feel like you're being considered. You don't feel like you're being thought about. It's almost like you're being ignored and the other person isn't even trying to care, right? Emotional conflict is always going to be rooted in feeling like your needs are not being met, feeling like you're not being heard or seen or valued or appreciated, right? Does that make sense? Any questions on that? All right. So I want to go back to something that I brought up earlier because I think this is very important. I want to spend the last few minutes on this. Unless anybody has any other of the 13 they want me to chime in on and expound on. So you have dimensions of conflict within marriage, right? Spiritual, biological, psychological, and sociological. All right. I want to get back into the victim paradox for a few minutes, right? The victim paradox. I see this a lot, which is why I want to just spend the last few minutes on this. What do you do when I am experiencing hurt or challenges or problems that my spouse has caused? And when I bring it to them, they become the victim. They turn it on me. They get mad at me. Now I can't express my feelings. I can't express my hurt. I can't express the pain. I can't express how it made me feel. Like, what do you do in situations like that? That's I feel like that is such a major challenge to marriages and relationships today. And so the thing is, whoops. And so the thing is, here's what I want to do. When it comes to this dynamic, right? As I said earlier, in many relationships, the person who is hurt oftentimes or sometimes they believe that their partner, their spouse, is going to just take accountability or be humble about it or be compassionate or be empathetic. But the question is, what happens if the opposite happens, where your spouse becomes defensive or shifting the focus from their wrongdoing, right, to how you expressed your issue, or where now your expression of the issue, as far as they feel like you're criticizing them. Sorry, I was letting somebody in. They feel like you're criticizing them, or they don't like the way you expressed your problem, and now it becomes about that. Simply meaning it becomes about everything except the issue that initially led to the conversation. What do you do about that? Here's what you do. It requires maturity, of course. But if your spouse does something to hurt you, and you bring that issue to them and they make it about them, the only thing you can do in that moment, unfortunately, the only thing you can do in that moment is listen to them and take care of their needs emotionally, and then come back around and express your issue again. And I know that's hard. I know that's a challenge. But the truth is, it's one of the best things you could do. Because to be honest, we've seen this time and time again. If you express something your spouse did to you and they get upset about how you expressed it or how you made them feel when you expressed it, all it's going to do is make you get more angry, and then you're going to get frustrated, and that's going to lead to more body language, more this, more that, and then they're going to get more mad at you, and then it's just going to escalate from there. So the only thing you can really do is take a space in a moment to deal with them and how they feel in that moment, even though you brought to them the challenge you're having. And then once that is concluded, circle back and express your struggle, your pain, your issues. Any questions on that?
Quick comment.
All right, talk to me.
Nothing. I'm just piggybacking on what you said, man. What you said, you just hit the nail on the head, because I had to go do the same thing. Basically, like with me and my wife, she'll come to me about a problem, and it was more like me. I might have a problem that I'm been holding on for a week. I might not just not say nothing, but when she come to me about hers, then I might just go ahead and throw mine back at her. So it had to come to the point where I had to just realize that when she come, I got to settle down, be quiet, hear her through it, finish her problem, then get to mine. But that's all I had to say.
Yeah, and that right there is excellent. That right there that's what you're supposed to do. That's in a perfect world. That's what all marriages should aim for.
Man, I ain't perfect because I don't do it all the time, but I'm working on it. But that's me.
Amen to that. So with conflict resolution, remember Proverbs 17:14, right? I'm gonna go back to it. It says, oh, we got a question?
Oh, not a question. I just wanted to acknowledge the strength that it takes to do that, what you're saying. As you know, Pastor, I've been married coming up on 5 years in August. And I want to say for the first 3.5 years, I was very narcissistic. And those traits really didn't start to break until I got up under your leadership, a little bit right before, but really started to break when I came up under your leadership. And that's exactly what my wife would do. She would come with me with an issue, and I would minimize her issue, and I would take advantage of that time and start expressing my issues, and she would cater to my issues. And she did in this, and Pastor, it was like that for like, again, 3.5 years. And that is not, I don't, if the roles were reversed, I don't think I would be able to do what she did. Especially being as egotistical as I was. So I just want to say that, I mean, I just want to acknowledge her strength, for just putting up with me for that extended period of time. Because it takes real strength to do that. But what you're saying, Pastor, that's not easy. That is not an easy, and not an easy thing to do, And a lot of times, men, we feel like we're so strong, but when it comes to those emotional things, for me, I realized, wow, I realized I'm not really as strong as what I thought I was. But I'm just so thankful that God graced me to get up under a true man of God as yourself, um, which has allowed me to become, um, a lot. It's a lot. I've grown in managing my emotions, and a lot of pride and ego, has been crippled. So I just wanted to say that.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you. And it's always my aim to make sure that, anybody under my leadership has everything they need, especially when it comes to their marriage, 1000%, that's why, you know, when I talk to husbands one-on-one, I'm very straightforward. I tell them, what's expected of them, and because I think ultimately, right, the Bible says, this does not take away from the fact that there are women who make relationships very contentious. But I'm just a firm believer that when a husband is in position, every wife is going to align, because she's going to feel safe. She's going to like kind of understand her positioning a lot better. She's going to understand, and come to love who she's with and who she has, and all the above. And remember, the origin of conflict. We talked about that the past 2 weeks. Um, between husband and wife, and Jesus rectified the marital challenges between us and God. And so it's up to the husband to do that and reconcile the marital challenges between him and his wife. I'm a firm believer in that. But again, every man who doesn't have a leader that can speak into his life and check him and challenge him and test him and push him and encourage him and call him out and hold him accountable and hold him responsible. Like, it's going to be hard to be in a marriage with a man that doesn't have any level of leadership. And I'm talking about real leadership. I'm not talking about your homeboy who you go have a drink with and they be like, man, you better stop acting like that, man. And I'm talking about genuine, challenging leadership, but and matter of fact, that makes me think of a scripture, First Peter chapter 3, in the New King James Version. It says this, verse 7: husbands likewise dwell with them with understanding, giving honor to the wife. So think about that statement. This ties into conflict resolution also. A husband's responsibility is to understand his wife. What does that mean? That means he is supposed to learn every in and out about his wife, everything about her, how she thinks, how she processes, her challenges, her weaknesses, her strengths, her vulnerabilities, right? And not to take advantage of them, but to learn how to cover them with love and grace and mercy, right? Because he has to understand his wife. The person a husband is supposed to understand more than anybody on the planet is his wife, and give honor to her.